You wake up one morning and your paycheck clears. Same number as always. You buy groceries. The total is 40% higher than 6 months ago. You check your savings account. Same balance. But when you try to imagine what it can buy in 2 years, the number means nothing. This is what currency death feels like. Not dramatic, not announced. Just the slow realization that the money you've been saving is becoming a claim on nothing. For 70 years, the world ran on a single assumption. The US dollar was stability itself. Governments held it. Central banks stored it. Trade required it. It wasn't just money. It was the foundation of every financial decision made by every country on Earth. And then, in one week in January 2026, that assumption quietly ended. Gold broke $5,000 per ounce. The dollar hit a 4-month low. And for the first time in 3 decades, central banks now hold more wealth in physical gold than in US Treasury bonds. 3 events. Same 72 hours. This wasn't volatility. It was a vote of no confidence in the United States of America. The system everyone trusted was simple. Countries produced goods. They sold them for dollars. They stored those dollars in US government bonds. Safe, liquid, reliable. The bedrock of global finance. It worked because everyone believed it would keep working. That belief was the system. And now that belief is gone. Before we go further, if you want to understand how the systems we trust quietly break, subscribe now. You'll see these patterns before they become headlines. What destroyed that belief wasn't a single crisis. It was a series of decisions that made perfect sense at the time. In 2008, the Federal Reserve began printing trillions of dollars to stabilize the economy. It worked. Markets recovered. The policy became permanent. By 2020, the U.S. national debt had doubled. By 2026, it stands at $38 trillion. Interest payments alone now exceed the entire defense budget. The government pays over $1.2 trillion per year just to service the debt. And that number is growing exponentially as old debt matures and gets refinanced at higher rates. The math stopped working years ago. Tax revenues are $4.9 trillion. Mandatory spending on Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest is approaching $4 trillion. That leaves $1 trillion for everything else. Defense, infrastructure, education, everything. The government is mathematically insolvent. Here's what that means. The Federal Reserve will soon restart quantitative easing. They will create trillions of dollars and buy the treasury bonds that foreign governments refuse to purchase. This is debt monetization. It's what Weimar Germany did, what Zimbabwe did, what Venezuela did. And every time, it ends the same way. Currency collapse. But the collapse doesn't announce itself. It starts with quiet exits. China has reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings by 48%. Russia sold nearly everything after the U.S. froze $300 billion of their reserves in 2022. Japan, America's closest ally in Asia, is now a net seller. Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the petrodollar system for 50 years, is reducing holdings. Europe is selling to fund defense spending. The buyers are gone. And in their place, they're buying gold. 1,000 tons per year. 3 years in a row. Record purchases. These are the most conservative institutions on the planet. They don't panic. They don't speculate. They manage the wealth of entire nations. And they're moving that wealth into metal they can hold in vaults they control. Why? Because in February 2022, the United States demonstrated that dollars held in the Western financial system can be frozen at any moment for political reasons. $300 billion. Accumulated over decades. Made inaccessible overnight. Every central banker on Earth watched that and understood. If they can do that to Russia, they can do it to us. China looked at $3 trillion in dollar reserves and realized those are hostages, not assets. Saudi Arabia saw 50 years of oil revenue stored in dollars and understood the same thing. There is no safety. There's no rule of law. There's only political power. And once that realization spread, the entire premise of reserve currency status shattered. You hold dollars because you trust they'll be honored, maintain value, and be accessible when you need them. That trust is gone, permanently. So they moved into the one asset that cannot be frozen, cannot be sanctioned, cannot be weaponized by a foreign government. Gold stored domestically is sovereign wealth that exists outside the dollar system entirely. And for the first time since 1996, central banks now hold more value in gold than in U.S. government debt. $4 trillion in gold. $3.9 trillion in treasuries. That crossing point didn't happen by chance. It happened because the people with access to data you don't see understand what's coming. The mechanics of what happens next are not speculative. They're mathematical. When foreign central banks stop buying U.S. treasuries, the government still needs to borrow $2 trillion per year. If there aren't enough buyers, bond prices fall. When bond prices fall, yields rise. The 10-year Treasury yield is currently 4.8%. If foreign selling continues, yields climb to 5.5%, then 6%, then 7%. Higher yields mean higher borrowing costs. Interest expense explodes from $1.2 trillion to $1.8 trillion to $2.5 trillion annually. At that point, the Federal Reserve intervenes. They announce quantitative easing. They create dollars and buy the bonds foreigners won't touch. And that is the moment dollar credibility shatters completely. Because once the world sees the United States printing money to fund itself, the remaining holders of dollars panic. If the Fed is printing trillions, their assets will be inflated away. They sell treasuries, stocks, corporate bonds, cash, everything dollar-denominated. The currency loses 30 to 40% of its value in 12 to 18 months. Imports become unaffordable. Inflation spikes to 15, 20, 30%. The American standard of living collapses. And gold, the asset central banks have been accumulating for 3 years, becomes the only trusted store of value left. This cascade has a timeline. We are in the first stage now. January 2026. Foreign central banks are net sellers. The dollar is weakening despite elevated interest rates. Gold just broke $5,000. The acute phase, when the dollar loses 40% and gold hits 12,000, occurs in 12 to 18 months. Mid-2027. That's the window. What happens when the system that defined your entire financial life stops working? You realize that wealth was never the number in your account. It was what that number could claim. And when the claim breaks, the number becomes irrelevant. The Romans learned this when their silver coins were debased into worthless metal. The British learned it when the pound lost reserve status after World War I. Every empire that prints its way out of insolvency learns the same lesson. The currency dies, and the people who trusted it lose everything. The difference this time is speed. The British pound took 30 years to collapse. The dollar is losing credibility in 30 months. From early 2024, when cracks first appeared, to mid-2027, when the crisis peaks. 30 months. That's the entire timeline of the greatest monetary transition in modern history. So what do you do when you understand this, but most people around you don't? You don't predict the future. You study the pattern. And the pattern is simple. The people who survive currency death are the ones who moved wealth into assets that exist outside the failing system before the panic started. Not during. Before. Physical gold. Silver. Hard assets that hold value when paper claims collapse. The people who get destroyed are the ones who wait for proof, who need the crisis to be undeniable before they act. By then, gold is $12,000 per ounce and unavailable at any price. The choice isn't between acting now or acting later. It's between acting now or not acting at all. What systems are you trusting without understanding them? What feels permanent in your life that runs on assumptions no one questions? What would you lose if the invisible structure holding your world together simply stopped working? Those aren't hypothetical questions anymore. The kind of person who survives systemic failure isn't the one with the most resources. It's the one who recognized the system was failing while everyone else still believed in it. What are your thoughts on this? Have you started questioning the systems you've always trusted? Drop a comment below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You'll want to see what comes next while there's still time to prepare. Central banks don't panic by 1,000 tons of gold per year because everything is fine. They do it because they have access to data that confirms what the math already shows. The U.S. debt is unpayable. The deficits are unsustainable. The Fed will print. The dollar will collapse. And the people who understood this early won't be the ones asking what happened. They'll be the ones who positioned accordingly. Gold at $5,000 isn't the top. It's the beginning. The crisis phase comes in the next 12 to 18 months. You have a window measured in months, not years. Most people won't act. They'll watch gold climb to 8,000 and say they missed it. But the people who recognize that central banks don't abandon a 70-year system unless something catastrophic is coming, those people act now. Understanding systems early doesn't make you fearful. It makes you adaptable. And in the world that's coming, adaptation is the only wealth that survives.